and implemented measures sooner. A study of the
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Sam. Morning, Roy.
Everybody.
I don't see minutes. Is that correct? No minutes to approve this meeting?
That's
Did I miss
correct.
those? Okay,
Yep, that's
great.
correct. No, well, we hope to have those for the next meeting for approval.
Okay, you're live now.
Okay, we're just waiting for one more.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
While we're waiting, I think there is a quorum, and I can call the meeting of the Belmont Municipal Light Board to order. It's Tuesday, September 13th, 2022. And yes, Michael is here now, so we're all here. I guess the first order of business is to a public service announcement for an important event coming up this Saturday.
Yep. And Aiden, can I ask if you can put that up on the screen for us, please?
So I'm gonna just read this in because I think it is important, and in case anybody, I don't know if anybody's on now, but they may be streaming or look at the check it out later. So the Belmont Goes Electric. There's a home garden and garage event Saturday, September 17th, 2022 from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Chenery Middle School. As you know, that's at 95 Washington Street, Belmont. So please join Belmont Light, Sustainable Belmont, and the Belmont Energy Committee for a joint home and garden electrification event. Test drive or ride along in a number of all-electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles from dealers and residents. Talk with a representative from Steel about battery-operated yard equipment, including leaf blowers, lawn mowers, and more. Discover the benefits and affordability of going electric in your home, garage, and yard, including rebates from Belmont Light. You want to move that up a little bit, Aiden? Can you do that? Thank you. Discover the benefits of affordability of going electric in your home, garage, and yard, including rebates from a Belmont Light. Talk to current owners of electric vehicles, cordless yard equipment, and heat pump systems about their experience. And there's also other sustainability focus groups will be in attendance. If you can't make it to the event, you can visit these sites to learn more about the benefits of electrification and rebates from Belmont Light, www.belmontclimateaction.org and www.belmontlight.com. Thank you. With that, I think we can move to our first order of business, which is the cost of service study discussion, rate discussion. And I do hope we can make some progress today. I think the goal all along has been to put new rates into effect no later than January 1st, 2023. Working backwards from that, we want to get that filed with the DPU 30 days beforehand, before the rates go into effect. And we wanted to have a public forum to alert the public to the plan before that as well. So we are getting close to when we need to make some decisions. And that was why I had Craig circulate the Belmont Light rate strawman proposal, hoping that that would focus us into the issues, the topics, the succession of decisions that we needed to make. So I guess we'll just start with any general comments about the strawman proposal, and then hopefully we can proceed into it.
I'll note quickly, Steve, I provided you and Craig feedback on that, but due to open meeting law, I was unable to circulate that widely. I thought you did a great job of starting to lay out some of the ideas we covered and gave us kind of a nice foundation. So I don't know if it makes sense to try and share that now during the meeting so that others can read it, but then obviously you're spending time live reading. There wasn't substantial comment throughout it, but a couple of, I think, key clarification points, as well as one additional topic. So however you think makes the most sense to proceed through that.
I think
happy to follow.
Michael, I think it makes sense to sort of take it up as we go through them, rather than, you're right, because of the open meeting law restrictions, you couldn't circulate it to everybody. But I think probably makes sense as we go through it, as you raise your important comments, to have discussion on them. So the first part of the proposal was the overall rate increase. And I think there's three ways to do an overall rate increase. Or there's the first way is to just have it increased rates on a yearly basis. I think Mayhew had presented us with the proposal for a 4% increase in 2022, a 3% increase in 2024, and so forth. And then another way to do it is just to say, well, in 4 or 5 years, we're going to need such an increase of, say, 12%. I think that's what Mayhew had presented. And the third way, which is the way I was suggesting, was take a slice of that. Let's see what we need for the next 2 or maybe 2+ years and put that into place now, understanding that the energy marketplace, the energy business is all over the place. We're not quite sure how many kilowatt hours we're going to be selling in the future. Let's put something into place for 2 years. The benefit there is that we're not going through this again next year, so that we can have something that's in place for 24 months, or maybe hopefully a little bit longer, depending on how the financials shape up. So that was the first part of the discussion. And then the second part of the discussion on that was, if we do the 2-year proposal, how much do we need to raise base rates now? And I know Mayhew is going to be modeling a couple things, which, as far as I know, Craig, we haven't gotten yet.
Well, I sent out late yesterday afternoon, 3-page document. Aiden, if you could throw that out, maybe the 3rd page. But I asked Mayhew to see if he could produce the document that would show us what was suggested, which was a 6%. Not this one, Aiden. This is the executive session. It's it should be the 3-page. It was titled Rate Increase Proposal. I can send it to you again if you don't have it in.
Yeah, because
Craig, I'm not sure I got that yesterday. Did you?
Okay. Well, it's basically 2 of the pages.
Oh, okay.
Hey, I'm going to send it to you now. It's just a 3-page document. 2 of the pages we've already seen from previous presentations of Mayhew. One is the 3 and 4% rate increase in the distribution rate over the next 4 years. So it was 3, 4, 3, 4. The second page was a 12% one-time increase. But the third page was scenario 3 here is the new one. And so this was a result of us requesting, what I asked Mayhew to do was either to show us a 6% increase in 2023 and then another one in 2025, or what he felt was the appropriate increase. And I haven't been able to talk with Mayhew. He was in transit yesterday, and but he sent us this one here, which is a 5% in 2023 and a 7% in 2025. So I assume, which is, I know that's a dangerous thing to do, right? But I assume that he feels that this style of increase would be sufficient to get us through those out years. I have a little bit of concern with this, and it's just as far as if you look at the net cash after debt repayment and pilot in 2024 and 2026, it's minimal this way. So I would like Mayhew to show us the 6% in year 1, which is 2023, and then another 6 instead of this 5 and 7, just to see if it kind of gives us that little bit of cushion, because these numbers are pretty tight from a projection standpoint. I think we'd be, looks like $53,000 after all bills are paid and pilot payments are made in 2024, and half of that in 2026. Now, 2026, I understand obviously is 4 years away or so. Not too worried about that one, but 2024, I would like to see that number a little bit more robust. And I think also in keeping with the proposal that Steve circulated, or that I circulated on behalf of Steve, a 4% rate of return was what I would like to see us shoot for. I think in Mayhew's documents, if you look at, we'll go back to the 12% rate, page 2, Aiden, scenario 2, please. There you go. That's the one-time 12%, but if you look at the rate of returns there in the second column, for the most part, he's trying to hug that 4%. So I think Steve was pretty much right on with the proposal to give us a rate of return of 4%. And like I said, scenario 3 was our attempt to provide that input on what it would look like, 2 one-year rates at 2 years apart. So you can go back to scenario 3, Aiden. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, so, I mean, to me, again, it makes sense. The 6% might get us, when we see the model, it might get us to the 4%, which I think is our goal. I know, Michael, you had asked, why is 4% the rate of return that we're aiming for? But I think that's more or less in the sweet spot that we've always talked about.
Yeah, if I could, Steve.
Yeah.
Just to provide a little bit more context on the rate of return, if you recall, back in November of last year, MWIC did a 5-year projection presentation for us, and he stated that they like to see MLPs, municipal public power light departments, at a 5% rate of return. They believe that that's the right number. So taking consideration where our reserve funds are, we're in pretty good shape with most of our reserve funds. So our depreciation fund and what have you are in pretty good shape. The one place that I think we're lacking a little bit is in our rate stabilization fund. So in just taking that into context, I agreed with Mayhew that a 4% and with Steve that a 4% was a good rate of return to shoot for.
I think Travis and then Roy had their hands up.
Yeah, Craig was actually got there at the end. I was just asking if my question was that the last line in the table, the total cash balance line, does that include rate stabilization funds? And is that what's included in that line?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's all of our all of our cash balances, so all of our funds, free
Okay,
cash.
great. Thank you.
and things of that
Yeah,
nature.
that because I'll just say that was my concern, but you answered that question already, Craig. So thank you.
Roy?
Yeah, just a detail, is the rate of return on sales or on the asset base?
Believe that to be on the asset base.
Steve? Oh, I don't know, Roy, are you finished?
Yeah, I would say, would not, if it's 4% on assets, and if it's especially, it gets to be a little complicated. If the assets are using historical costs, which are old, then a 4% return on those assets may actually be on the low side.
Yeah, I think the asset base is not a stagnant number. So we look at the end of every year, we look at what we did for improvements in the system, and that gets added in. And then there's a across the board depreciation of 3% in Massachusetts that's taken off. So all that is kind of thrown into the mix there. So that number, or the asset base, is constantly changing and evolving, and as we improve the system, that number rises.
Yeah. Okay.
So to me, if we get a 6% increase modeled, it should get us hopefully about to where we need to go for 2023 and 2024. I mean, like the 5% gets us to 4% in 2023. It's a little bit lower than I expected for 2024. But that would be my preference to get us to a 2-year rate increase that gets us through the next couple of years. It wouldn't be my preference to vote now on an increase in 2025. It would be my preference to see what the numbers look like in 2 years before we take a vote on raising rates in 2025.
I'll just throw in, I think that the one thing that this new slide, that the 5% and the 7% increase shows us, is that it suffices us for the next several years, 23, 24, and then we obviously have to have that discussion again in 25, but 5% just gets us through, and I believe 6% would be the better number as well, but I will have Mayhew model that for us and make sure that that's presented to the board.
Yeah. And part of this, for me, is raising rates as little as possible, but as necessary to maintain the health of the utility. I mean, we could do a 12% increase now, but to me, that it assumes we know what's going to happen in the future, and a lot of things are unknown. So that's where I am on that. Comments on that, on where we might be going on a 2-year increase, the 6%, perhaps, when we see the modeling?
It's Steve, if I may jump in. First, thanks for putting this trauma in together. I think it really frames everything and helps us make progress. And I just want to say, yeah, I voiced support for the 2 years. I think I was convinced. I think Mike was raising a question about what the inflation rate is in the model for the years beyond 2024. And, we really don't know what the inflation will be there, or what the conditions will be. So I do agree with the 2-year time frame. And sounds like 6%, whatever that is, around 6%, whatever that number is, makes sense. And I think is it 6% just on distribution, or is it 6% on the whole rate? Just to confirm.
Just on the distribution rate.
So it's really an impact of like 3% on somebody's bill or something then. Okay, great.
Yeah, I think slide.
Although the rate proposal did include a fixed cost adjustment too. Sorry.
This was actually
meter cost, but yes.
I think this was one of the biggest points of confusion I had, and there was a lot of comments that I put into that document of when we talk about a 6%, and Dave, you know, that's exactly the point is 6 sounds big, but if it's 6% of a component of a larger number, then it's smaller. The counterpoint to this is there's another thing that is, as far as I can tell, and I suspect everyone else is going to agree, really going to drive costs up, and that's the cost of actual generation on our line item bill. So we're seeing the bill is going up. We're on the elevator going up no matter what. And this question of how much do we want to tack onto that to address this specific question for distribution, potentially customer costs. So it's wonderful that that number 6% becomes smaller because it's a component of the larger. And I don't know if it helps our cause or hurts it that it's going to be even smaller because the total's getting bigger due to the increased cost of generation. But I think in order for me, at least, I think there's sort of 2 tracks that my brain is doing here. One of them is looking at that line item. What is our net cash after debt repayment? That's a number that we just have to hit. And so maybe it's fine to sort of back calculate out using that sort of endpoint. But the second point is, what is the customer bill impact? Because I think that's really what's going to drive our success and failure of how we manage any sort of rate increases. So the more information, I know that Craig, you guys had supplied some more information to help answer that for the executive session, but the more that maybe we could talk about that now before going on to anything else, I think could be helpful to inform the rest of the conversation.
So just to point out, Michael, quickly, at least in Mayhew's model for 2023, the total average residential bill goes down. And I think he's assuming must be assuming the generation cost goes down. I think we talked about at least under his model. I don't know.
Well, he's got those contracts. Let's sign them.
Well, the other thing we should keep in mind is the bill has already gone up just because of the PCA. So the changes. So you look at 2021 to 2022, it went up. What does that say? 8.5%.
Yeah.
You're right, Michael. There's the 2 pieces. Right now, we're sort of looking at the piece, the non-flow through piece, the distribution piece that relates to the health of the utility.
Yes, and I mean, forward energy costs are higher than I have seen in the last 15 years for this winter, for next winter. That's going to be a massive impact. And so I think just to help frame when we say 6% increase, we need to, one, be very careful to continue that sentence to say 6% increase to distribution rates to avoid confusion as a 6% bill increase. And I think it would be helpful then to say, combining this with what we see to cover our actual energy costs, what is our actual bill increase? Because I think that's sort of the number that we need to fully understand.
You're absolutely right, because customers don't really care about rates. They care about what shows up on their bill. And the bills have been going up and probably will continue to go up regardless of what we do with the distribution rate.
Yeah. To that point, Dave already touched upon it, but I think the reason why we see the decrease in the residential bill on Mayhew's slide here is because at the end of 2022, the assumption is our PCA is zeroed out at that point, because we are, as you might recall, we're changing the formula for the PCA to Mayhew's recommendation. And so that cost will be, it's kind of pulled out and put aside. And so looking at the bill right now, because that's a pass-through cost, that's why it shows this reduction of approximately $1. And then it looks like in 24, it goes up back to kind of the same level, about $1 higher. So yeah, that's where those numbers are coming from. But I agree with everyone that it is important that when we talk the percentages, we're clear that 6% is just on the distribution side, or whatever the new percentage is on the overall bill, we get that out to customers. That might be, I don't want to say easy, but it should be straightforward to do for 2023. where we're pretty close to that time frame, and we kind of know what our cost may be. Obviously, the 20% open hedge on our portfolio is to the whims of the market. So if it explodes or continues to go higher, it's going to be harder to predict what that percentage is. And I wouldn't have much confidence, I think, in those out years, 24 plus, going out, because we just don't know where the market's going right now. It's, to Mike's point, highest he's seen in 15 years. It's just all over the place right now. And we had the beauty of a real low market over the last, 4 or 5 years, and it's just totally flip-flop. So it's very difficult right now to predict where that's going.
Okay, so it seems like there's general agreement that we should, when we see the 6% modeled, we should make a decision on a 2-year rate increase, a rate increase that would go into effect, for 2023, which would hopefully carry us through 2 years. And that we'll make a final decision on that when hopefully Mayhew models that, and we can see it at the meeting in a couple of weeks. I think it is at the end of the month, 28th, I think it is.
Yes.
Okay.
I want to just quick check on that, Steve, the schedule. I mean, our vote comes after the public forum also, right? Not just after Mayhew's presentation. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I guess we can talk about that. I mean, we could, I mean, we need to have a proposal to present to the public forum. It could be a vote, contingent upon what we hear at the public forum, or we could just, some way we have to agree on what to present at the public forum, and whether that's a vote or not, I don't know. I guess this does raise the issue. I think we do want to get citizen input, and perhaps there would be a needed adjustment based on that input, but I don't think we can totally open up that forum to people who have, whatever ideas they have, to have a day-long discussion on it.
Okay, so I think that my question is, I guess, underlying it has two motivations. The first is I think Roy might know, but Craig, you might know too. There's some statutory, we need a public hearing before we have a rate increase, and like a posted public hearing about rates. I thought that was something we needed. I don't seem to remember that.
No.
Okay.
I think in years past, it was done as part of just a board meeting. I think what we've done is we've called out the section of the board meeting as a rate hearing. It's just to be clear what the discussion is and what it's going to be about. But I think, certainly the public is most boards will always allow the public some input, but it's really more of the board providing an explanation to the public of why rates are going up or what the changes are going to be, as opposed to the public feeding back to the board what they would like to see, for rates.
Okay. And my understanding was that we needed to have that rate hearing. I thought that's why it kind of went through the previous hoops to chunk it out separate from the standard agenda items. Okay. And then the second thing is I just feel it makes sense to vote after we give the opportunity to, be responsive if we wanted to be. So, after input. So that's
okay.
Just
well, all right. One way or another, we have to come to agreement on the proposal as what to present at the public forum.
Travis, just to make sure, can you repeat what you just said? Then you want to have input on what we're voting on from the public, or sorry, I just totally misunderstood.
Well, we're elected body, and I feel like it makes more sense to be a responsive electric body instead of a body that, So if we're going to have a public forum, I'd rather not have already, absolutely decided. So that's just my inclination. And I think we've already gone through a lot of iterations, and I think then that's great. So I think the key thing is I think we could defend it pretty easily in the public forum and answer a lot of questions. So I don't think it's going to go sideways. I just think that it makes sense to do the final vote after that.
Thank you. Understood and agree.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just that we have to have a proposal that we all agree on to present at the public forum. That's fine.
Definitely.
Okay. So can we move on to the individual rate cost allocation part? So in the residential rates, not proposing any change to the general cost allocation for the residential rate class, except for low-income residential rates. Last time when rates were adjusted, the low-income rates, which are at a pretty steep discount, were not adjusted upward at all. It was just, my recollection was a 2% increase, was not applied to the low-income residential rate. So I'm proposing that we move that up. We adjust upward the low-income residential rate.
Steve, sorry to interrupt, but when you
Yeah.
say 2% rate, you're saying the residential rate overall, the distribution rate, what percentage are we increasing what of?
So last time the rate increase, what it was, we were sending it to the light board. There was kind of a limited amount of time we had, limited sort of bandwidth on their part. And it was just decided to go in, Lelback and the general manager to go in and recommend to the light board a 2% rate increase for all rate classes. When we got there,
It's an the overall rate, sum of all of the individual rate components for the rate class goes up 2%, or one of the rates in a rate class is going up?
I think it was just that the volumetric rate in each of the rate classes where it's going to go up 2%.
There's multiple volumetric rates though.
Well, the transmission and generation costs are more of a pass-through anyway. So really, you are talking distribution rate. So that where I see some of the differences in that rate is with the distribution rate.
So when we got to the light board, we made the presentation, LBAC made its recommendation, the general manager made its recommendation, the light board said, great, everything's fine, but we don't want to raise the low income rate. And so that was not changed. So I'm just suggesting that we take that into account when we adjust rates here. Obviously, to the extent the low income rate is something like a 35% discount off what the real cost of service to serve those customers are. So we want to do the right thing for the low income customers, but to the extent there's more and more and more subsidy, someone else is paying for it.
I'll just throw in that Mayhew has advised us that we should be adjusting the low income rate in lockstep with the residential rate, so that the discount that exists already is such that he believes it should be just an equal adjustment across the both rates, residential rates.
Okay, so that's fine. Yeah, he was charged with looking into that last time, and if he thinks that's a more reasonable way to proceed and keep the discount at where it should be, then we don't have to make any further adjustment in the low income rate.
Well, I'm just adding to the, there was several steps in the process. The discount or the distribution rate on low income has been getting wider as over the last 10 plus years as we've gone through rate discussions. So it used to be, I'm sure you all know that we do give a discount or no cost for the meter or the fixed charge. So there's a discount there. And then there, originally back in 2008, there was a 5-cent discount in the volumetric rate for the distribution portion of the bill. That's grown over the last 10, 11 years to about a 6.5% difference. So what Mayhew was advocating is whatever we do for adjustments in this time frame, we do equally to low income as well as distribution. I think that's a little different than what you might have been saying, Steve, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you were saying is that 2% that was not adjusted at the last rate hearing in 2019, I believe, bringing that back and getting the discount on the distribution back to that 5 cent number from that spread in 2008, the original spread might be more advantageous to the utility for stability. But if I'm missing here.
Okay, we got I think Andy had his hand up first, maybe Dave and Roy after that.
I actually think it was Roy first, but.
The discount for low income is, I think, quite extreme right now. So the customer charge is $0 instead of $10.60, and we're proposing that the $10.60 go up for regular customers. And the current tariff says that the low income distribution charge is 0.014 compared to 0.075 for regular customers. So that's, I don't know that there was any real study put into an appropriate differential. It was just the low income rate just was left untouched as other costs have escalated. And at some point, I think it's entirely appropriate to escalate to have the low income rate track some independent measure of costs and also low income incomes. I don't know what the low income thresholds keep changing each year, and it's there's no reason to lock something into what it was 10 or 15 years ago.
And Steve, that's the way I was reading the document, that on top of any change that we make to the low income rate with this discussion, that we add back in, if you will, a 2% that was not adjusted at the last hearing in 2019.
Right. Andy, Dave?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I just want to clarify kind of the proposals that are on the table. So, Steve, your proposal or your straw man is a 2% increase on just the distribution energy, the volumetric charge for low income. Is that right? Or am I mistaken? Or is it 2% on top of 6%?
2% on, it would be 2% on top of the other distribution rate increase.
Okay, and that's also neglecting any change in distribution customer charge.
Well, you're right, and that's why I'd asked Mayhew to look into this at the last meeting, because I presented this for discussion purposes, but I think we need to what this discussion leads me to think that we need a few more minutes with Mayhew. And what Roy said, of course, and as if we raise the customer charge, how does that affect things? There may be maybe the adjustment has to be different. So I'm not quite sure, but I'm just trying to point out that we need to keep that low income rate at some reasonable discount and not keep growing it to the point where it's out of whack with other low income rates. I know not that many municipals have low income rates, but the IOUs do.
Thank you, Steve. And I guess just a question, this is a question for Craig. You may or may not have the answer, but how does Belmont Light typically handle this from a bookkeeping standpoint? Is there a write-off, or is there any kind of funding or subsidy that's coming from state or federal monies, or how does Belmont Light reconcile this low income rate?
It's the discount that they receive is socialized across the different rate classes.
Okay,
There isn't any outside money. It's just all in our overall rate structure.
thank you.
David?
Proposal just to simplify this. I mean, one, let's not think about the past through the generation. So just maybe for Mayhew's sake, just say, hey, you know, on your typical low income residential customer, deduct 40, 50%, whatever the right number is, where it's kind of equivalent to now. Just set a target, hey, 50% off your distribution, because otherwise it does get complicated. And I'm wondering, you know, if he's trying to calculate this, is he going to go in circles?
Yeah, I mean, I had mentioned last time that the IOUs, Eversource and National Grid, their discounts were in the range of 32 or 35%. So I was hoping that he could, you know, take a look at what our overall discount would be, and perhaps the discount would be with the changes we're proposing, and keep it within some sort of range like that, which would be consistent at least with what the state thinks low income discount should be.
I agree to that approach. And I think as long as we can just say, hey, let's do X% discount off our distribution. And then you're right, Steve, you can give us some numbers and we can set that.
Okay.
And that would just, I think I would simplify it.
So Craig, I don't know if he's still engaged in that or if he remembered to do that, but hopefully he can come back with something not too complicated that we can agree on for next meeting.
Yes, that is one of the open task items that he will have completed for us at the next meeting. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of us, but it ties into later in your document. We talk about a split somehow on raising the fixed charge to some degree, which then naturally would lower the volumetric rate on the other side. So when it comes to the low income rate, what we need to remember is obviously, as we talked about, there's a zero charge on the fixed charge. So if we raise the fixed charge for other customers, we're giving a bigger discount to our low income customers. However, when we lower the volumetric rate, maybe that evens out depending on, you know, that percentage increase on the volumetric rate. So that's the analysis that has to be looked at. To your point, Steve, how that all kind of shakes out is, you know, whether we're going to harm any one customer's type over another with making those changes. We unfortunately we don't have that information for this meeting.
Okay. Andy, Travis?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on Dave's point that, and I'm not opposed to Dave's point about percent reduction on the distribution volumetric charge. My point is that if we're targeting a percent of the overall bill reduction, that's going to be impacted by generation costs increasing or expected increases in generation costs. So the discount being provided to low incomes could shrink because their overall bill is growing because of the pass-through of the generation costs.
Yeah, that's true. I will also mention, Travis has his hand up, but I'll also mention, I don't know who designed this low income rate. I mean, I'm not sure anyone else who has a low income rate has a zero customer charge. But anyway, go ahead, Travis.
I want to just say that I guess I don't feel it's necessary to hit the 30% if I feel like living in Belmont with a rent and everything else is pretty hard. And so I'm not necessarily thinking that the state's 30% discount. I'm willing to have a deeper discount if that's where we end up at the end of this. So.
Okay. I guess we should keep moving on. The next item was large municipal rate. And this is a little bit of an issue because right now, the cost of service study for large municipal rates shows a return of 6.7%, which is a little bit higher than the 4% target, overall target. On the other hand, there's no real rate-making justification for a separate municipal rate, because there's no showing that the municipal customer it should be any different from a large commercial customer in terms of cost causation. But putting that aside, I think Mayhew at one point has suggested, well, moving the large municipal rate to commercial rates, which would result in a very large increase, bill increase to the town. So the question is, what do we want to do with that large municipal rate? And the proposal that I had, which is just one of many possibilities, is keep the large municipal rate, recognizing that we're part of the town. The 6.7% rate of return, reduce that to 4% rate of return, and proceed on that basis. We do know that a large part of the increased costs to the town have been as a result of the new middle high school. And there will be solar panels up on the roof of that high school. And my understanding is, and Travis and others may have a better sense of this, that's going to reduce the electricity costs to the middle high school, at least, not the other large municipal users, by a third. So it's a sort of a juggling act here. I'm not suggesting that anything is, there's any particular rate principles involved here, but it's just, how do we adjust this, knowing we're part of the town? We don't want to see the town have a big rate impact. And in fact, as a standalone rate, the return is more than what our target of 4% churn is. I don't know who had their hands up first, Dave or Travis.
I think it was me, and I apologize. I might be a little bit long-winded here, but just to push back, Steve, I think it's clear that the large municipals, the load is driven by the schools, and having worked on school energy projects for 15 years, they peak in the morning to early afternoon, so their cost is a lot less. So I think it's pretty amazing that we got almost a 7% return, even on the deeply discounted rates we have now. And I think that's because their load profile is different than your common commercial. So there's a big difference there because they're schools, right? So I think they should be treated differently. I think it makes a lot of sense to do that. I'm not crazy about the current rate structure, the way the rate's structured and how the charges are accumulated. I know we're out of time, so maybe I could get dealt with it a different day, but it seems a little archaic currently, but I guess put a bookmark in there. But I'd like to make a pitch for a 0% return. And so some of the reasons to do that, I think you look at other rate classes, like our low income rate, we make a minus 15% return, and that's a social equity kind of thing. I think, we're talking about on the residential, the fixed rate, the customer charge, and how that impacts low end use customers. I think if you were to break out each of those 10,000 customers, you'd see a lot of them we get a negative return on, right? Now that's a social policy kind of thing, as we're talking about, we'll discuss more. And I think also the fact that we give, rebates for EVs and heat pumps and things like that, it's also a social equity kind of concern. So given that these are schools, given that they have a different load profile and everything, and given I don't think this rate really fits them very well, I would argue for a 0% return on the large municipal. And just jumping a little ahead a bit, I agree with, the other municipals. I don't think we need, I don't think they do much for anybody. So just for simplification, we can get rid of the medium and small. But anyways, that's my soapbox.
Yeah, well, that's certainly, yeah. I mean, 0% return is lower than any of the other rate classes. I think the residential customers are 1.7, I think, percent return is what we saw from Mayhew's modeling. But it's all a public policy issue.
Sure, but Steve, just to jump in, I think probably half of those residential customers you're getting a negative return on, or maybe 40%. There's some big chunk of residential customers, and within that class, you're also getting a return on because of policy, right? So, anyways, just to clarify.
Well, you always create these rate classes, and within those rate classes, there's always going to be a wide range of individual returns. You just can't create rate classes for every customer. But yes, okay, Travis.
I want to make sure that people have time to react to Dave's proposal, or the 0% return. But I guess I have I think Dave's comment about the load profile of the schools makes sense. Is the reason that the large municipal is the costs are different according to the cost of service study is basically capacity charges? Is that what's causing the higher rate of return versus the commercial rate?
Throw in transmission also, Travis.
Okay, thanks. The numbers didn't make sense when I was reading the paragraph, but now I think I understand the flow. So I would love to hear more people's reactions to 0% or not.
I would just point out, that it's a public policy issue. If we want to do that, that's fine. But it's a zero-sum game. So to the extent that there's a couple $100,000, or I don't know how many dollars were involved here, 300,000, I don't know. Someone else is going to be picking up that cost. Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Second that question of it's a zero-sum game. Who do we subsidize? Who do we sort of assign as put the target on their back that they're going to pick up that tab? And I think there's certainly reasons and rationales to do that. A 0% is maybe steeper. And so is it 0? Is it 3% if we're targeting 4% elsewhere? The other piece that I think is, at least from my perspective, important to consider is, if you gave them a 0% rate of return, if you sort of subsidize them like that, what motivations do you change for them to manage their load? If I make your costs cheaper, you have less motivation. The value proposition to install a storage project for the school goes down. And so now they're less motivated to manage their load in a way that helps Belmont, helps the region, helps like the total system, because they're immune and buffered from any sort of actual price signals. And so I think how we design and structure some of these rates, that element of what are you incentivizing and what are you disincentivizing from a DER, distributed energy resource technology, whether it's demand response, whether it's load management profiles, HVACs, batteries, et cetera, vehicle charging on site, all of those questions, the value proposition is going to change substantially depending on how much of a discount they have. So, to the extent that we want the school to value those types of solutions, their cost should reflect the actual costs of the system. What that means in terms of how much to get subsidized or not subsidized, that's an open and interesting question. But just to make sure that we think about, once you start sort of changing these cost levers from actual cost, the value proposition changes with that.
Can I just quickly respond, Michael? Michael, I agree, or Mike, I agree. I think that gets into the rate structure, because right now they're morning peakers, and part of their generation charge in KW, 15-minute KW, and it makes no sense. There's no incentive to, it's non-coincident. I think we've been talking about that. There's just been no concrete proposals. So given that, I'd love to see that, but given the timeline we're on, I'm not sure that's going to happen, right? So the discount, I don't think really makes much of a difference. It's really that structure that needs to be implemented, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not sure who is next, Roy or Andy.
I think that was me. One important point that I think, so Mike, I appreciate Mike's input there, and I would second that. I think that we want to be thoughtful about the signals we're sending, and to Dave's point, I would be supportive of re-examining the structure, but do we have time? My point is just, I think I recall this discussion from a couple meetings ago when I asked the question, is there any downward pressure on the number of rate classes that we have? Is it more of an administrative cost to have 8 or 9 rate classes rather than 5 or 6 or 7? And I think the answer was no, there's no real difference. So I don't feel a need to simplify and eliminate some of these municipal rate classes if it helps us from a policy standpoint. In other words, if we determine that all the municipal rate classes have X% return and all the commercial rate classes have Y% return, and from a policy standpoint, we can all agree on those 2 numbers, I think there is value in keeping the separate municipal classes. And I also say that because the interplay with pilot, we're making a rate of return on the power that we sell to the municipality, and then we have a rebate incentive or some pilot payment that is essentially dollars flowing back. So the mechanics of that and the impacts on the ratepayers, I think, needs to be thought through. And so what that rate of return should be set to kind of should take that into account, right?
Thank you. Roy?
Let me just say a word in defense of inertia. It does sound like the municipal rate is a little bit elevated for reasons nobody can really strongly justify. But rather than have a significant reduction in rates now, which would require a noticeable adjustment elsewhere in the zero-sum nature of things, given that there is a steady inflation in rates that might be moderate, but it's fairly steady. The easiest path I would suggest is just to freeze the municipal rate where it is, and over time, if other rates get adjusted, it'll come down to where you'd like it to be, and you can ultimately get to the proper equilibrium without big adjustments elsewhere. Because there's no urgency to reduce the rate right now. I mean, the town the cost is baked into the town's tax system, so to speak. I mean, it would be nice if it were optimized, but it's not that critical an issue. I think we can get there in a more, let it evolve slowly, and it will get there eventually.
Yes, Roy, but rates are going up. I mean, regardless of what we do, the town's going to see higher electricity costs.
But I'm saying that whatever differential is baked into the municipal rate, it does not need to grow as fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I am a little bit leaning towards what Roy said. I hadn't thought about just keeping sort of the same ratio, but I guess when I think about 0 versus 4, at least, I was leaning towards 4, given maybe my rationale would actually justify, closer to say 6 or whatever else. Because the other thing I'm realizing is the cost of service study probably doesn't take into account and allocate some of the time that Belmont Light spends doing town-related activities, services for the town. Those are probably a little harder to staff. Just for instance, Sam's management of the solar on Chenery, along with numerous other activities. So I just want to note that there is some additional probable costs that, depending on how you allocated some of the core staff time, that the town is providing. So there's actual, I'd say, legitimate costs, and I can't put a percentage on that, of course, but I don't think 0 is right. So I'd be aimed towards having the town pay for, that interaction. So.
Just very quickly say that's interesting, Travis. Thank you for raising that. That's a helpful perspective to have in mind. Thank you.
All right. Well, So where are we coming out on this? I mean, I will say for myself, I think 0 is not right. What the right number is, I don't know. You know, I had thrown out 4%. Is it 2%? Is it keep it where it is now? So I think it's time just to poll everybody and see where you think. Now, I think I understand where Dave's coming from. So Andy, Michael, Travis, what do you think? And more, yeah, I know Travis, you mentioned you opined on this, but in terms of more,
yeah. So maybe since I had the mic last, I'd be more inclined to not fiddle with this too much and maybe just keep the sort of 6.7 or whatnot, or 5. Like I could, using my own rationale, I could justify having a rate of return slightly higher than 4, maybe, but not. So anyway, so yep. So I guess if I had to pick 4 or 6 or 0, I'd probably choose closer to 6.
Don't we love the scientific rate making method that we're engaged in?
I think I probably come out similar to Travis. I will note that in the top of the document, one of the comments I made was it would be wonderful to have codified in a sort of governance document a specific, here is our strategy. You know, it's wonderful that in November somebody said we should be targeting 4. Let's write that down so that we can reference. And then if we need to make an adjustment for something like this, it's an adjustment relative to a written governance document. I think, you know, considering the points Travis made, Belmont Light, at least my understanding is, does provide a number of soft services, we'll call them, for the town as a sort of consultant and support of various town enabling projects. Some of the electrification for transportation things might be another category. So I think, and, you know, maybe Roy's comment of if we make no adjustment to the distribution rate and those costs are going up, do we still see a 6.7% return? So, you know, to the extent that there's not an immediate urgent need to make a change here and we just sort of leave this as it is, that rate of return, I think, someone correct me if I'm wrong, will come down because our costs are going up. And so we'll see it sort of converge somewhere between 6.7 and 4. And then we can come back and make a much more formalized, methodical approach to any policy decisions here after we've maybe established a much more clear governance structure of sort of what is the rate of return, how do we address it across different rate classes, whether it's town, whether it's low income, et cetera, and be much more methodical about how we make subsidization decisions across rate classes.
So you'd keep it where it is now, Michael?
Correct.
Okay. Andy?
I think Mike's suggestion to document our strategy at the conclusion of this process is really an excellent one. I think I don't know enough about the policy context around setting municipal return on investment versus other stakeholders, other ratepayers. Given what I know, most of which has come from this process, I would say if I had to pick between 0, 4, and 6, I would say 4% return. And what that would allow us to do is to merge all of the municipal and commercial and industrial rate classes into small, medium, and large. And then I would advocate for a separate breakout rate class that heretofore was the large municipal, but could just be for schools based on their unique load shape. And so rather than, so go from 6 rates to 4, but you're breaking out large C&I or large muni, is transitioning into just a large school rate class. And that way we could address some of the concerns that were voiced previously. I realize I'm complicating matters, but that's just a straw man to be discussed. But I think if I had to choose today, I would say 4% return.
Michael, you have your hand up.
Quick clarifying question, and Dave, I just pulled it up, so thanks for raising this. If we change the rate structure to have an on-peak period for demand charges, to, you know, distribution demand charges, and that peak period presumably would look something like, and I'm going to guess 4 to 8 p.m. in the winter, 1 to 7 p.m. in the summer, based on at least what we identified for residential time of use. School peaks, outside of those on-peak periods, we come up with some lower distribution charge for off-peak, if that's when your peak is, or we use their peak period demands for the actual peak period to link those cost causation. So the modification would be, instead of what is your peak kilowatt hour for a 15-minute interval in the month, it's the peak kilowatt hour per 15-minute period on peak in the month. And now maybe the school rate and large municipal and everybody snaps into a similar sort of cost causation. The schools don't get penalized. We don't need to come up with a different structure. And now they all sort of look very similar. Am I off base here or in left field, or does that make sense as a way? I don't think we do that now. And sorry, Steve, this isn't answering your specific question, but if you just simply change when demand charges are assessed from any time of the month to only during peak periods, I think the schools would be just fine and probably see no change in cost if they were moved over into the larger municipal rates. Does that make sense, Craig?
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. The only thing I want to caution is, in the large municipal rate class, there's 10 customers, obviously municipal customers, but they're not all schools. So one is the fire headquarters, one's the public library, and it looks like Town Hall Complex is one of them as well. Most of them are schools, but they're not all schools. And so I just want to caution that if we're going to create a new rate or massage this rate differently because of the schools, that, yeah, we take the time to kind of work through those numbers so that we don't harm maybe one of those other customers, other entities. Just to kind of recap how we got here, though, I think really what happened, we were just looking, or Mayhew had made a statement that he felt the 6 rates that we had, 3 commercial, 3 municipal, were redundant, and we didn't need them all. After he did a analysis on that, the small and medium, as you recall, was really, there was no movement there. Nothing changed greatly either way. And then we saw in the large that the go into a commercial rate would certainly harm the town. So so going back to Steve's point, just to sum all that up, is the recommendation right now is either to do nothing with the 6 rates from a reduction standpoint, or only reduce the small and medium municipal rates, right? Get rid of them and keep just the commercial rates. But we haven't done, or Mayhew has not done for us an analysis on the large municipal rate as far as rate of return and what that could look like. So we could always have him look at that if there's something that we want to get. I think, Steve, that's what you're getting at by asking about what percentage rate of return is a good percent. I kind of go back to what Dave said earlier, which is maybe for the sake of getting through this process, we leave these where they are, and then we revisit it as a specific task to see what this is, because I also do think that there is a problem if we carve out the schools and make a rate specifically for the schools. I'm not sure if that's an allowed process, so I want to be careful there as well.
Okay.
If I answer anyone's questions there, I'm just kind of.
All right. So I guess we're talking now more about leaving it the way it is, or perhaps using 4%. I know, Dave, you were advocating for 0. It looks like the sentiment is more toward having a positive return on this.
Sure. Clarification, leave it as it is. I agree. We need more work on this. When you say leave it as it is that the rate? Would that include like the generation is flat, or is just that the distribution charge is the same? I mean, we don't increase the distribution charge, or what do you mean by leave it as it is?
I think you leave it where it is, meaning that you're going to have that still a 6.7 rate of return, but you're going to increase the distribution charge by whatever
Okay.
the number is that we.
I just can't justify in my head, we're on residential, we have an average of 1.2% or whatever it is, 1.5, on a school, you got a 6.7. You know what I mean? I think relative to other types of customers, the 6.7 doesn't seem fair to me somehow, but I guess other people think it's okay. But yeah, I just don't see residential 1.5 and other, the school is 6.7. So I would advocate for as low as possible.
Yeah, I understand that. I also, know that the commercial customers, the return is somewhere in the 20% range. So, this would be a very different discussion if we were at the Department of Public Utilities and trying to equalize all rates of return. Okay, so 4%? Is that somewhere we're gonna, we've got to agree on something.
4% for the distribution charge, correct?
4% return.
Rate of return.
Rate of return.
For the entire class.
For the entire class of large municipal customers.
I can ask Mayhew to model that and have that available at our next meeting.
Yeah, again, this is, I recognize everybody has, valid points here. I'm just, at some point we have to come up with some sort of result. And so.
I think 4% for the entire class makes sense to me. It's consistent with at least our sort of spoken objective for rate classes. And I think that's a reasonable reason to be moving in that direction. And then we put a pin in this, we can come back, whether it's next year, or next month, or next week, whenever that is. But for now, if we just, to the extent when and how we can, move towards 4%, I would appreciate that. I think if Mayhew models it, that's great, but I will support more moving towards 4% at this point in time.
I'll second that.
Okay, so I think we're as much as can be in a consensus about that, recognizing that there's a lot of valid points one way or the other. So we're almost through with the rate structure. Individual cost allocation. So other large municipal rates, are we okay with moving those small municipal rates into the commercial rates? There would be some rate impact, but not significant. Well, I call it not significant. It was like 7,000 for one and 12,000 for the other, something like that.
I agree with your proposition, Steve.
Okay. Andy?
I am flexible on this point. I'm okay with keeping them as discrete separate rates, and I'm okay with folding them into the commercial and industrial rates, but I want to just note that if they share the same rate class, they share the same ROI target, correct? So now the municipal buildings and the commercial and industrial buildings in town have the same ROI for their rate class, correct?
Yes, that would be right.
Okay. So, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Andy. I was just going to add that from a Belmont Light perspective, keeping them, they're already existing in our system today. So there's really no work to keep them. Remove them does streamline our rates, or at least our, what we show public facing, but it's really kind of 6 of one, half of the other on the Belmont Light side of whether we keep them or not. To your point, Steve, the impact on the rate is minimal, either way. So it doesn't hurt to do nothing as far as eliminating them. Mayhew, when if I recall last week or the last presentation, when he came back, he kind of backtracked on the need or his wish to eliminate those or eliminate some of the rates that we had after running the analysis. So it really is just the wish of the board whether we want to streamline by a couple of rates or not.
Is there any comment on that? Travis, Dave, Andy, or Andy, Michael, anything on that?
At this point, I defer to you, Craig. I know you just deferred to us, but I think let's keep it simple, and we've got so much other stuff to do that if you want to take this on, I support you. If you want to postpone this, if you want to not do it, I support you.
I agree with that. Let Craig make this one.
Sorry, Craig.
So we can move on then. One way or another, we'll have a decision on that. So
Well,
as usual,
well played, Michael.
Yeah. So as usual, we're over time. I know Michael has a hard stop at 10. We have executive session that we want to get to, talk about a couple other things as well. There's not too much else to discuss other than what I think could be a bit of a discussion on the customer charge. So I'm going to skip over that for just a minute and finish up the other little items, which I think are not going to take up much time. So on the residential charge, one of the rate design issues was whether we're going to continue to have an inclining block rate at the 1600 kWh during the summer months. And I think Mayhew has suggested, and I agree. I don't know what it's not that I don't think that inclining block rates might make sense in certain instances, but you have to have some sort of justification for them. And I never have understood what the justification for this is. So I think, I hope we agree that we can eliminate the inclining block rate and spread the costs. I think Mayhew said it was $44,000 of revenues, and we could spread those costs. I don't know, Craig, if I would think those costs would be spread to other residential customers. But we can check with Mayhew as to what he advocates, whether it's other residential customers or whether it's all customers.
Yeah, I think it kind of all comes out in the wash as far as how it gets spread around. But I agree, just to add my 2 cents, I guess, is so, there really is no justification for the inclining block rate outside of a conservation effort. And I think we talked about it in the past, is that really the message that we're trying to provide today, where we are promoting electrification and those types of things. So I do think the inclining block rate is inconsistent with what we are promoting today. And for that reason, I would say we should eliminate it.
Yeah, just to be clear and not to take up too much time, I mean, I do think energy conservation is important. And if there was a rationale for a particular point at which you were increasing the block rate and a rationale for how much you were increasing it, I think that might be a further discussion, but I have no idea. There's been no justification for this particular inclining block rate. So to me, it seems like it doesn't make sense and should be eliminated. Continuing on, other commercial industrial rates. One thing I guess I don't understand when we're going to be increasing the rates with demand charges, how the demand charge gets adjusted when we're talking about an overall, say, 6% increase, how the demand charge gets adjusted vis-a-vis the volumetric charge. So that's one thing I'm hoping Mayhew can help me on. Maybe others know the answer to that. I don't know. I don't. But it would seem to me that you want to adjust both the demand and the volumetric charge for those demand customers. But again, that's something that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, we'll have Mayhew provide an answer to that at our next meeting.
And then finally, Mayhew has suggested an adjustment to rate E, which I think rate E should be adjusted to move away from the strict ratchet that is embedded in that rate design. But maybe to me, I don't quite, I mean, the way Mayhew has proposed it now seems, I don't understand all the elements and exactly what we're getting to and exactly how that's going to go toward our goals of energy conservation and electrification and so forth. So it seems to me that maybe we could have a further short discussion about rate E. Okay, so that does leave the customer charge issue out there. And I think this might be, take some time. So I'm not sure how we want to do this. Do we want to come back to, do we want to do some of the other agenda items and come back to it? Knowing we have about an hour and 10 minutes before Michael has to leave. And I think we probably should respect that and try to use that as the end point of the meeting. So what do you think?
Steve, maybe give it 20 minutes and see where we're at.
Okay.
How's that fit for everybody? Yeah, we might be, it turns out maybe we're all on the same page or pretty close, but who knows? Okay.
All right. So diving into that then. So you saw my write-up, which, shows that the fixed costs per customer should be around $20 per month based on a cost of service study. Nobody has a customer charge that high. Most are considerably lower. Concord is higher. It's the only one I saw that was higher. And what do we do about that? I mean, it does make sense to have, the reason, if you have fixed costs, customers should be, costs should be allocated so customers are paying for those fixed costs before you get to volumetric charges. On the other hand, where we are now, we're not going to increase our costs by double to get to $20 customer charge. I mean, that would be as I think Mayhew modeled, a very significant increase in bill impacts for a number of customers. So what is the balance here? And so what I suggested was starting to move in a systematic way toward a customer charge, which is indicated by the cost of service study. I don't know exactly what that number should be. I threw out $2 without having modeled it. So it would go from $10.60 to $12.60, thinking that would probably occasion a modest increase in bill impacts. Obviously, for the smallest usage customers, the bill impact is going to be more than for the larger customer. Again, it doesn't involve low-income customers because they don't have a customer charge at all. So this would not affect them. So that was my overall thinking about it. I think, Michael, you had a different proposal as well to kind of eliminate a fixed customer charge entirely. I don't know where other people stand on this. I do think that for people who don't use a lot of electricity, say go away for January and February, there are people in my cohort who do that, they should be contributing to the distribution system. It shouldn't just be based on volumetric charges. They should be contributing based on the fixed costs that they are incurring. So that's where I am on this. And now we're open for discussion.
I'm happy to throw out, and this concept we talked about on the last call, I think it could apply, or at least merits consideration, both for customer demand charge, but then also some of how we were thinking of the distribution charge, where there's essentially to some degree a fixed cost for customers. We recover volumetrically on the distribution charge. We recover through a set cost on the customer charge. And so the idea is essentially, determine some threshold kilowatt hour monthly consumption, probably the average consumption for a rate class. So for residential, whatever our annual monthly average would be, you take the cost, in this case, it's $20 per customer, and you divide that by the sort of annual average value, and then you just create that as a volumetric rate. Maybe you go a little bit over, maybe you go a little bit under, whatever it is to sort of adjust and sort of accommodate that there's not all customers are at the average. I think Steve raises an interesting point that some people might be gone certain months, but maybe their load is higher in other months. But it could allow you to say, keep the customer charge at $10, but then layer on some sort of small incremental volumetric cost to get you closer to $20. You could eliminate it and have it be a slightly larger volumetric charge that would essentially recover the same amount of cost, or do some sort of combination therein. Similarly, this also could apply on the distribution, which is a separate topic, but just to flag it, that instead of sort of a unending sort of no matter how high up the volumetric scale you consume, you continue to pay past the point at which you've paid your fair share of that cost. So as a concept, would just like to introduce this for consideration, and then specifically here for what we do with the customer charge as a specific application instance where maybe it could be done at a smaller scale, just giving the total relative dollar amounts for people's bill. And I'll stop with that.
David.
You just put yourself back on mute, Dave.
Sorry about that. I think, Mike, your proposals are very interesting. Again, I think we're just up against a wall on time. And I think we definitely should look at that. I think hopefully there could be a balanced way to do that. I would say to split the difference, because, we have that tension of, lower use and energy efficiency against strategic electrification. I think that the plan put forward for 23, 2024, which, we're on a 2-year time frame anyways. I would suggest just adapting the 2023, 2024 increases, like it goes up to 1242 in 2023 and 1456 in 2024. And just we're going back and looking at everything anyway, so look at it then. So I think that splits the difference. And also I think as Roy pointed out in our last meeting, this hasn't been adjusted in 15 years, it sounds like. So just inflation based, probably around 1456 or so is probably equivalent to what it was 15 years ago once you adjust for inflation. So anyways, that's the pitch I'd make.
Dave, I'm sorry, I missed it. So what would the customer charge be for 2023?
1242. That was the one what Mayhew came up with.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
in 2024,
1456. So it's about halfway to 20 or so, roughly, and it keeps up with inflation.
So that's a $2 jump from 23 to 24.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to see customer bill impacts to see what that means for. So, okay, so you're suggesting sort of for the 2-year period of $4 increase.
Right at the end of the second year would be a $4.
Yeah.
That's on that schedule Mayhew put out, but we're just we're not buying into the years later they go up to 20.
Right,
We
right,
just
right,
evaluate
right.
after 2 years.
Right. Yeah, no, I that could work. We need to see bill impacts for any, even the stuff even the 2% that I propose, $2 that I propose, we need to see bill impacts because
Well,
the
on
low
slide
usage customers.
third,
Yes, go ahead, Travis.
sorry, on slide 13 from the August 23rd presentation, there is some total bill impacts analysis. But
isn't that for the $20 customer charge?
yes, but it also includes columns for the 2 years that Dave just mentioned.
Ah, okay. I didn't catch that.
But the only difference that I don't quite follow, and because I've forgotten the slides, I'd have to revisit the whole slide deck. But like it does show sort of a falling distribution charge, which I know if you're increasing the customer fixed charge, but I forget what that means. But anyway,
Yeah, it does lower the distribution charge, to your point, Travis.
Yeah,
which would be, and just to connect the dots, which would be counter to our let's just raise things 6% for the next 2 years. Wouldn't it,
Well,
Craig?
it's a combination of the two, right? So the first scenario, if you will, what I think we're talking is 6% just in the distribution rate. And that's one way to get there. And I think what we're saying now kind of shifted gears a little bit. There's another option, scenario 2, which is to raise the fixed charge instead of the distribution rate to some degree. So in this case, the scenario that Dave brought up is getting halfway there, and that would lower the distribution rate. At the end of the day, we'd still be at a 6% increase. It's just where we're increasing that rate in the fixed charge versus the volumetric charge.
right. Andy?
I will say that's fine, but that's not how that's the proposal. The way the straw man proposal is laid out is that it was kind of maybe that's what you meant, but when Mike asked his clarifying question is 6% the distribution charge an hour and a half ago? I thought we said yes. So now I'm confused that I thought that meant 6% is different than anyway.
I mean, to me, somehow there's an overall 6% increase in the distribution. That could be volumetric only. It could be fixed charge only. It could be a combination, more likely, of the two.
Okay, then I will reset my thinking there. Thank you.
Andy?
Thank you. Two things. I would be supportive of more analysis into Mike's proposal. I want to understand it better. For a long term, I think it's a tall task to try and implement in the near term. If I understand it, it's a sort of a declining block scenario where you're taking the fixed charge and apportioning a higher KWH or a higher volumetric charge for the first X number of KW. Great, thank you. I see Mike nodding. Second, I'm supportive of, I think a $2 order of magnitude increase on the fixed cost is reasonable in my opinion. And I think that also achieves most or all of the 6% targeted increase on the Belmont side of the ledger, on the distribution side, whether it's fixed or volumetric. So I think $2 is a reasonable ballpark.
Yeah.
Andy, just to clarify, your $2 is one $2 change for both 2023 and 2024. So
negative. Sorry to. I am not as convinced on the 2023 increase for the for the fixed cost, but I am open to discussion. I think that in my mind, the $2 2023 increase is reasonable and straightforward.
Andy, if I could ask, so the $2 is what the proposal from the board, from the chair, is what you're referring to, not the roughly $2 proposal that we received from Mayhew in 2023?
It's both. So Steve's straw man puts us at 1260. Mayhew's number puts us at 1242. I'm saying one of those two is that they're pretty darn close. So I think that's a reasonable 2023 increase. I'd like to better understand or think a little bit more about the 2024 fixed charge.
Sure.
Yeah. I will say I'm a little hesitant about raising the fixed charge, basically 40% over 2 years. And I would still prefer a smaller increase that goes into effect for a 2-year period, meaning that $2 or something in that range. But of course, it's up to the rest of you to opine upon and decide. Dave, do you have anything on that?
I understand where you're coming from, Steve, and it's just, it's a tough position to be in, trying to support both electrification and, efficiency. And, it just seemed to me that what appealed to me about the two-step, the $2 for each year, is it kind of keeps up with inflation, and it kind of splits the difference right now, So we're still giving a pretty healthy subsidy to folks who don't use a lot of energy. Anyways, that's what appealed to me. Anyways, I'll leave it there.
So what's the inflation aspect here?
I think Roy mentioned it last time. I think if I remember correctly, he said this 1050 or whatever our current charge is hasn't been raised in 15 years or something.
Well,
so if you just track inflation, it comes out to around $14 or $15. I think that's.
I mean, a lot of our charges haven't been changed in 15 years, but yeah.
So if I could weigh in for a second, what I like about a raise in our fixed charges versus, and to some degree, as opposed to just doing it in the volumetric rate, is I kind of go back to our time of use discussions and why we went there, right? What was the purpose of that? Was really to give control over usage to some of our customers that could control their usage. So what I like about splitting the difference here or raising the fixed charge is it provides that what's the word I'm looking for? The income needs for Belmont Light for our stability, but it also gives the customer some incentive to possibly lower their bills by a lower distribution rate. So if they keep their, from a conservation standpoint, they keep their bills lower, they're going to save money on their distribution rate. Obviously, their fixed charges are a little bit higher there, but it just gives some incentive that way, in my opinion. So that's what I like about the split between the two. And just to touch upon, I think we certainly need to run some more analysis on, Mike, on your proposal. I guess the only downside I see is there really isn't a surety in the income to Belmont Light that we have today with the fixed charge. And so that gives me pause, but we'll have to do the analysis to see if there's any, what that looks like.
So Craig, specifically, what is your preference in terms of customer charge for 2023, 2024? How do you look at that?
Well, based off your suggestion, but also Mayhew's, that the $2 in the first year, I think that would be my preference. What I'm going to ask Mayhew to do is, if we just concentrate on the next 2 years, running the analysis in more detail on the 1242 and the 1456. But I kind of think if we go to 1242 or 1260, $2, I think that would set us up for some time. Give us that increase that gets us, call it one step closer to where the cost of service tells us we should be, but it doesn't, cause any real delineation and low use versus high use, that type of thing, right? Some customers are going to feel that more so than others, such as our low income customers. So that's one of those as well, where a $2 increase, I think, is justified just based off of inflation and a 15-year time frame of not increasing that. So I like your proposal, I guess, Steve, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, I guess we need to get a little more data from Mayhew on this. In particular, I'm still fixated on the bill impacts. So I'd like to see that, and I guess we can make a final decision on whether it's $2 or roughly $2 in 2023, and then another $2 in 2024, or if it's just one increase in 2023.
Stephen, just to weigh in, I think this would be a great topic. I think it's something that folks probably could wrap their head around a little bit. And, I think we're going to vote after the public forum. So I think we're close enough. We don't really have to make a decision now, that we can take what we have to the public forum and then finalize after, just as a procedural thing.
Okay, Andy, I do have a comment on that. Andy? Parts here, not that we all do, myself included, but I think it just could get to be a real confusing discussion. And if you get 5 people on one side and 5 people on the other side, and then what do you do? So to me, I'd want to come in with a particular proposal for every element. Andy?
I just want to clarify that I think, looking at slide 13 from Mayhew's presentation last meeting, where he maps out the 1242 customer charge in 2023 and the 1456 customer charge the following year. It seems like the distribution volumetric charges are actually declining. So it seems like the $2 increase in fixed charge would actually achieve more than the 5% that Mayhew was modeling in this scenario, the 5% increase. So what that means, what I interpret that as is a $2 fixed charge increase in 2023, and then we could consider or implement any volumetric changes and increases in 2024. In other words, I'm open to, but I want to discuss further the fixed charge change in 2024. But I think a volumetric increase in 2024 is not unreasonable.
The volumetric charge in 2024 is, I'm sorry, I just missed what you said.
Not unreasonable. So in other words, we could still implement or I guess it depends, your proposal, Steve, is 6% in year one, and then, forgive me, what was the year three's increase?
Well, I wasn't presenting any decision on an increase in year three.
Great. So just the 2-year time horizon, a single increase in 2023 to the fixed charge of $2 might be enough to carry us through that 2-year period.
Right.
For the residential customers, yeah. Right. And I can't say for sure. I think we need to have the numbers, but that seems like that's the way it looks to me.
Okay. Yeah, that might be right.
So just following up on Andy. So that's a really good point. So we could just say, hey, 6% increase and just do it in the customer charge. It's around $2, but that way it's really clean. The volumetric charge stays flat or something. Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll have Mayhew run the analysis on the 6% on the distribution rate as we talked earlier, but I'll also have him run a $2 increase on the fixed charge and have that analysis done, and that'll tell us whether that 6% is covered, as Andy's suggesting it could be, but which I tend to agree with him, or not. So we'll have both of those pieces, and then the board will be able to, decide which direction they want to go at the next meeting.
Craig, could we tweak that just a little bit? I like what you said, but to add one more layer of data is to say, what is a customer charge that is 6%, and maybe it's just what is $1, $1.50 to $2.53, or whatever simplest, but that gives us the ability to say effectively does that make sense?
Yes, yep, I understand.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that hard to run some sensitivity analyses, I think is what you're talking about, Michael. So
Exactly.
let's do that. All right. So we're on a good track. I guess other than recap what we've done, I will be in touch with Craig just to go over and make sure I remember correctly, and you help me remember exactly where we are on each of these points we've already discussed. But I think we've made a lot of decisions today, and we're on track to get to making some final decisions next meeting. Is that okay?
That's great. And thanks again, Steve, for the straw man.
On the timing, so it sounds like we're going to have a meeting, then the public forum, and then maybe a meeting in November to finalize everything. Is that the timeline?
Roughly, yes.
Okay.
We have a meeting on the 28th, and we'll have to set up another meeting in October and November, but we certainly would want to finalize it in November so that it can be filed with the DPU.
I'd like the rates to take effect the first of the year, so we typically give a 30-day window there to our customers to see the rates, digest the rate, that type of thing. So if we could have a final vote, if you will, in November, that would be best for Belmont Light.
Yeah, I think that's essential. Okay, nothing else. We'll move on to the next item, which is the future meeting topic planning. And I guess, Craig, do you want to take this?
Aiden, I'll ask, can you throw that up on the screen? Do you have that available? Well, while he's looking at that, I sent that out earlier with all the other documents. And I think there's another version because this doesn't have the all the potential topics listed underneath. But really, what going back, the document itself was meant as just to try to give us some idea of the reoccurring meetings and when we would have them. And then what I did is I listed a bunch of potential topics that we could layer in, whether the board wants to specifically state which month of the year, for instance, they want to hear a certain topic, or if they want to leave it up to the GM or the chair to, there you go, Aiden, thank you. Or leave it up to the chair and the GM to kind of fill out or round out the agenda. But there's only a handful of reoccurring ones that, to me, really jump out. One is it's around all the financial forecasting that we do, right? So the beginning of the year, there's the budget presentation. I'm proposing a January presentation. We could obviously do that in December of the year prior, but for the sake of conversation, I have it here in January. There's the GM's performance review at the beginning of the year there in February. March, we're thinking that we could provide to the board some oversight of what we're doing for demand side management and possibly on the communication role as well. And then back in the May timeframe, we're thinking the audited financials for the previous year. So basically the end of April is the first time, usually it's right around April 27th-ish, that we have our final meeting with the Permanent Audit Committee to bless our financials. And so we would present those in May. And then June, we had our first quarter update on our financials. And you can read the rest, obviously, but I do have a question to ask. So first quarter financials, and honestly, even our second quarter financials, which we're showing in September, there's not, I feel there's not that much value to the board in going through those in depth. The numbers are still very much proposed numbers at that point. For instance, September, we have the second quarter financials. We have those prepared, and I can send those to the board for review. But right now, we were looking at October to run through those numbers. You'll notice, though, in November, we have our third quarter financials, which I think are much more meaningful. So I would propose that we actually skip the second quarter financials if the board's okay with that, and that we would present the third quarter financials in November. I think that gives you more meaningful information as far as where the markets have been for our sales as well as our expenses. And so I'm open to any discussion on that, any points of view. Like I said, we would still prepare the first quarter and second quarter financials, but I think it might be better that we just send those to the board for your personal review, and then you could provide us feedback and we can answer questions, that type of thing. Or if you prefer to do it at a board meeting, we can keep it that way. But short of that, like I said, these are what I saw as reoccurring, and then I try to list a bunch of potential topics that I thought would be beneficial to the board. And I'll ask the board if you want to layer those in so that we know exactly what we're talking about, what month, or if you want to leave that up to the chair and the board, the chair and the GM, I'm happy to do that way as well. So with that, Mike, I see your hand up.
Yeah. First, Craig, thank you so much for pulling this together. I think this is going to be an incredibly helpful tool for us sort of planning board activities and how we deliberate throughout the year. So thank you. I support that. I think maybe there's, if that can be supplied to the board as scheduled here, maybe we spend 5 minutes and actually mean it 5 minutes as a, hard cap. You maybe just, hey, here's some high level notes. And really the focus of that would be less of let me walk you through, but this element is important and will have broader impacts. It's different than normal. It's something like that. But I think, with that small little bit of seasoning that we could sprinkle on, otherwise I think that's a sensible approach and effective use of everybody's time. But thanks again for pulling this together.
Andy? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to echo Mike's comments. Craig, thank you so much for putting this together. This is, personally for me, this is really helpful to kind of see the landscape of the year. I did want to add one suggestion here. Apologies, I didn't get it out to you before the meeting. I would want to look at or think about electric vehicle charging, and that could be in conjunction with or thinking about battery storage, two-way charging. But just, I think that's a important issue for us to think about moving forward. With respect to the second quarter financials, I'm open to your suggestion, and I think maybe even creating a second column that just is for document transmittal. I think second quarter financials in that time frame is helpful, and then how that takes shape in the meeting, I'm flexible.
Okay. To your point, both you and Mike, we do have a cover memo, if you will, that we do attach to all our financials. So we could go through that formally at a meeting in these timeframes. But I like Mike's idea. We'll send out the whole overall package of all the financials, and then we can just maybe go through any questions that people have at the meeting that might make a better use of time. Dave, your hand's up.
Thanks, Craig, and I agree. This is great. Just a question: the rate study. Given that we're talking about a 2-year time frame, what would that involve?
So Yeah, I apologize. I should have pointed that out so to avoid confusion, but this is actually referring to what we're doing right now. So what you're looking at is, although my intention was for 2023, that was a holdover from what we're doing in the end of 2022. So that would be removed for 2023. I apologize. I should have had those removed before I sent this out.
I'm breathing easier.
Yeah.
Travis.
I know we're burning through the 5 minutes that Mike proposed really quickly, and I think that I would propose the use of the 5 minutes as brainstorming topics, and then maybe we spend a different time or some other way, choose when to allocate them and slot them in, because I also have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. EV charging was on my list of things. In particular, I question whether or not we should do level 2 versus level 3s and the locations thereof. So supporting Andy's addition. I'm wondering with the IRA whether there's new ownership models for Belmont Lights on like owning and operating the solar on top of the ice rink or other buildings in towns. So I think that's something for us to discuss and explore and have a plan towards, because as new projects come up. Solar on the Cambridge Reservoir, some town person recommended looking at that and opening that. I know that there has been historical conversations with Cambridge about putting solar there, but it's been brought to my attention by a member of the resident of town to explore that further, along with another person emailed me about putting solar on the Flanders building. They were Google mapping and noticed we had a big flat roof that didn't have solar on it. Yeah. So I think and I know some of those maybe aren't board items, but I want to make sure that, so part of that's me communicating to, but then maybe there's a way to think about that holistically. Some of those last three are all kind of related to generation and ownership. So
I just want to, there's I think Craig was going toward what we're going to have to look at every year, sort of there's many topics that are coming up.
No, but I'm adding things to the potential topics list, like battery storage.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm adding things to, sorry, I'm wanting to use this time to brainstorm things that maybe we'd like, I don't know, but Mike's idea about the declining block rates structure could be added to the potential list, for instance.
Yeah, I would say that first I'll apologize. Electric vehicle charging was something that should have been on my list, so I overlooked that. But the IRA, discussion I think is very valuable. We'll do that. I kind of thought of that as legislative activities on my list here, but I can spell that out as a one-off. And that's exactly what it was. It was really just a brainstorming of future items to talk about. And I guess what I'm asking is if anyone has any real strong feelings on a time of year that they want to spend on any of these things, let me know. Otherwise, I think the most efficient way was just for me to work with the chair on when to bring these into our discussion so that we can balance out all the different meetings, so that we're not heavy, say in the May meeting, for instance, where we want, do a lot of financial, discussions. But so
if I could just continue, sorry. One other thing is I don't see time of use discussion or reflection, because I think we'll have results. So maybe I forgot when that is, but that would be good to also chart in. And I'm willing to help Steve if you need help thinking about some of these topics. So
thank you.
One piece, and I think this kind of touches on what Travis was brainstorming on there, and to be clear, the 5 minutes was for the financial updates, not for the brainstorming here and now, but maybe that's also a good hard. I think what could be helpful, and I'm happy to help do this, and maybe we all take this as a homework assignment, is, and this gets really fancy, we don't need to go this far, but if you imagine that meeting topic column, each one has a cell, fill up, I'll pick on January, what percentage of the meeting do we want to allocate to the 2023 budget presentation? Is that half the meeting? And now we can kind of roughly say, we've got, at least 45 minutes or half an hour, whatever it is, for additional topics. And then from there, as Travis was saying, when do we talk about a, overview of our time of use pilot project? We slot that in. And to some degree, let's not, this is just like our hedge strategy. Let's hedge up our meetings to 80%. And then we can, address things as they come. But we've got a plan for when are we going to talk about streetlights? The knee pool meetings, all of those schedules are known months and months and months, sometimes years in advance when a voting action will happen. So we can then slot in advance to say 1 or 2 months before, let's deliberate if it's a relevant topic we want to recommend a vote on, that type of strategy. So it starts with the sort of hard requirements, which is I think what's in there now. And these are like, we have to talk about Q3 financials this month. What else do we then have time for? And we try and kind of populate as appropriate. So just as a soft sort of suggestion to all the board members, maybe we take as an exercise to individually sort of think about, and in order of operations, welcome, thinking here, but to try and add in when and how do we cover what, or maybe we do sort of a voting priority or something like that, but to really try and get this a little bit more populated as to what the sort of potential discussion things might be throughout the year would be, I think, a valuable. Let's not bind ourselves. Let's not make too much work, but just to give a little bit more structure to forward conversation and deliberative planning.
Andy, maybe last comment?
Yeah, real quick. For rates, I see on the potential topic list, I would think that should include the TOU and as well as potentially, Mike's declining block suggestion. I think hedging strategy is another one to think about. Then that's probably power supply, but just to think about that as being included. And then finally, question for Craig is streetlights. What are our potential concerns there? Is it mostly about implementation and performance, or is there just out of curiosity?
Streetlights was just it was asked about in the past, streetlights via the structural change committee. And so I showed it there because I think that it's still kind of an open item that we've got to, close. So that's why I showed it as a potential item.
Okay, thank you.
And the rest, I'd say, Andy, you nailed, right? Hedging and time of use and under rates, under power supply. That's kind of what I was thinking. I just put a generic, or if you will, placeholder there as potential topics. So what Mike summed up is really what I was asking is if there's any one month that you feel is more advantageous to the other to discuss a certain item, whether it be rates, whether it be power supply, that type of thing, let me know. And we'll fill that in as a hotter or more concrete goal in that year. But one of the, I guess the only other question I would say, I kind of like Mike's idea of maybe a percentage of time. I just don't know what the 100% of time is because it's changed over the last 6 months from with the previous board it was a 1 hour meeting. We've obviously morphed a lot longer, and for good reason. Obviously, we have a lot on our plates with the rate discussion, right? So I don't know if that's worth the discussion or not, too, what we want to do from a time period for our meetings, but that goes, for the percentage.
So I think we should continue populating this and talking about this, but I think we should move on now just to make sure we can finish up by 10 for the people who have a hard stop. Is that okay?
Works for me.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is public comment. I don't see anybody on from the public.
Roy is on.
Roy is on. I consider Roy a member of the public, kind of.
I have a question that I can ask on behalf of the public, which is someone, and I know we've discussed this, but to clarify potentially is someone has been charging overnight at the Claflin lot and has received parking tickets for leaving their car overnight. And I just I know we've discussed that in the past, but is that appropriate? Should the police department be ticketing those 4 spots? The lot has its rules.
So, yeah, so right now, the Claflin lot is still under those particular spots, where our charges are still under the town's policy of the parking, under the town's process. So that's probably why they're being ticketed there. What'll happen is, sooner rather than later, we'll be going to the select board to request that they change the parking on those 4 particular spots from what they do today, which is the general parking process, to allowing us to charge at the charger for using those spots. And we would put up some signage. And so we would basically carve those spots out of the town's process and put it under a separate program that is just based off the cost of the electricity on the charge itself. But we've got to bring that forward to the town. So if they're being ticketed, it's just because of the rules of the lot, which is under the parking committee.
Yeah. I assumed for the last umpteen years that we've had those chargers that people were leaving the car overnight, and I hadn't heard about tickets before. So maybe there was a grace period, but okay, thank you. I'll let them know.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if Roy, okay, I think we're set. Roy, any more nasty letters this morning, or are we all set with that?
Oh, check your email.
Oh, okay. All right, so we're, I guess, over public comment. We're into future meetings. We should.
Sorry, hang on just a sec, Steve.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Nasty comment emails, is that a board topic and something?
No, it's not a board. It's not a board topic. There have been some folks in town, anonymous folks in town, have been sending. Travis has seen them probably. Nasty comments about the town, how the town operates.
As long as it doesn't impact the board, that's fine.
No, it's not a board. It's not a board thing per se. It's not a board thing. I mean, to the extent that there's angry people that are looking to criticize how things are operating in town, I guess it could be, by extension, something that we'd have to deal with in the future, but not now. Okay, so we have a meeting scheduled for the 28th. Do we want to schedule an October meeting? We also wanted to have a public forum in October, but I think we need a separate meeting as well. Do we want to do the 12th to the 19th?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think we were shooting for the 3rd Wednesday of every month. Does that make sense to everybody? Or am I misremembering it? But I think that's what we were.
Well, we started doing every 2 weeks, so that would put it at the 12th. But damn.
Well,
so if we wanted to keep the pace up, we could continue with the 12th, and then. But it depends on when that. I think it makes sense. It would make sense to have the public forum between our September 28th meeting and the next October meeting, so we could vote in October on the rate proposal, the final rate proposal.
So do we need to talk about when that? We're getting close in time to 10 o'clock.
If we
do we want to, I'm sorry, Craig, go ahead.
I apologize, Steve. I was going to say, if we do the 19th as our next scheduled meeting, and maybe the week of the 12th, if not the 12th, as the public forum.
Works for me.
Okay.
Obviously, the forum would be in the evening, and I'll leave it up to the board if they want the 19th to be at 7:30 or in the evening as well.
Just a quick note that the Monday, the 10th is Indigenous Peoples Day. So that would potentially shrink the number of days for the forum, but just to put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, how much notice do we have to give to when that forum is going to be? We should probably notice that if it's going to be in the first couple of weeks in October, we should probably notice that pretty soon, right?
Yeah, I think we could start advertising that for sure.
Okay, so what are we thinking of the 12th for the public forum at night?
Wednesday that week works best for me. I would be unavailable on Thursday and challenged on Tuesday.
All right, do we want to,
Steve, clarification, is that October 12th or November 12th?
I think October.
October 12th?
October 12th, okay, for the forum, okay,
Is that
that works.
sound okay?
Yeah.
So that would be in the evening. The 19th, I think would be in the morning, as we've been doing. All right, so let's put those two down and keep moving here. I think we need to get to executive session to listen to, unless there's something else. Anybody have anything pressing? Okay, so we need to move to executive session to discuss trade secrets or confidential, competitively sensitive, or other proprietary information relating to power supply. We need to vote on this by roll call, and we will not be returning to public session. Here's the roll call. Andy?
Sorry, I had to find my, aye, Machado.
Michael?
Michael McCray, aye.
Travis?
Travis Frank, aye.
David?
Dave Beavers, aye.
Steve Klansky, aye. Okay, we will then adjourn the public session and move to executive session. See you over there.
Okay, good luck, guys. See you all.